So we've had this class for several months. I have done a lot of food related creativity and photography classes with my colleague Deb Livingston, who does a lot of our food and cooking classes. And so this one is a good step if you ever wanted to. I know there's a project underfoot to create a cookbook with recipes. So if you want to throw in pictures with any recipe you would submit, you could do that. But we're going to talk about choosing the right lighting for your photographs, how to stage the shot, and then different compositions that you can try for your food photographs. So I'll stop before I go any further just to see if there are any specific things that people are looking to do and want to learn in this class. Either of you have anything? No? Okay.
I don't really have anything in particular, but I'm just kind of looking for inside photography projects that I can do when the weather's too hot or too cold to go outside.
Yeah. That is a great idea. That any kind of still life photography, including food, is really nice to do this time of year.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what is food photography specifically? You know, in the age of smartphones, people, when Facebook first came out and we had our smartphones, we were snapping pictures of every dish that we got served at a restaurant, every little dish we made at home. It just sharing food photographs was pretty popular. It is a form of still life photography though, and you'll even see professional photographers doing this, both for artistic purposes, just to show maybe some stock photography that they want to sell. And then there are commercial photographers who are doing this as a specialization. So some of the photos that you will see in magazines, on restaurant menus, will look they will be kind of staged. And some of that is good, but there are also going to be elements in there that I don't think you want to mimic. It's a lot of work for creating something that will be visually appealing and draw customers in, but we're not necessarily talking about selling photos. So the food in the picture just isn't always what it seems. I just want to set expectations here. Pros use a lot of substitutes for certain foods. Motor oil for syrup, glue for milk on cereal. The big one I learned way back was mashed potatoes for ice cream. And they do this because a lot of times they're spending a great deal of time doing these photos. A lot of times they have them in a studio with all kinds of lighting cast down on the food items. If you're trying to take a picture of an ice cream dish and you've got some studio lights coming down on it, that ice cream isn't going to last very long. It's going to melt pretty quickly. And that's not the picture these folks are going for. So they end up substituting things so that they can really take their time. Sometimes a photo shoot will take hours. So same with cereal, you know, the milk is going to get it soggy after a while. And with syrup, it's just going to soak right into the pancakes or waffles. So that's why they use motor oil. Sometimes it sits atop the pancakes a little better. So you don't have to do all that. We're going to be taking pictures a little more spontaneously, and we're not going to be spending hours and hours and hours on them. But if you would like to take some interesting still life photography involving food, you can take your time a little bit with this, with some staging techniques and things like ice cream and cereal, anything like that. Some of these techniques you may have to employ a little bit. I wouldn't put glue in to a bowl for cereal, but you probably need to do things a lot more quickly than what you're going to see commercial photographers doing. But what is good to have is good lighting and nice staging and a good composition. And we'll talk about all three. The lighting, when I say good lighting, you can get some studio lights pretty inexpensively on sites like Amazon or B&H Photography. I have some that I bought years ago, and sometimes I'll use those to kind of control the light that I might be using to take a photo, but you can also just use the ambient light, and that's fine. Light streaming in from the window, anything like that. Just to get some nice soft shadows and highlights. Something like this. You see a lot of texture here in the quinoa. Here you've got a bowl, a couple of bowls here sitting next to a window. So you've got that natural, and I think maybe even there's a thin curtain or something here. So you're getting some nice diffused light coming in. Here you've got some strategically placed light, possibly, coming in from the side. That makes for a compelling look. And you can always just go outdoors. So here is a really nice shot with some outdoor background, and the lighting is pretty even here, which leads me to believe that this was taken in the shade or maybe in the evening when the sun was at an angle and not creating a lot of overhead, really harsh shadows and highlights. Here's another example of it. Again, you can see this even lighting here, which is much more pleasurable to look at. Same thing here. These are just ideas. A lot of these visuals I'm showing you, these photos, are just to kind of give you some ideas of what you could set up. So even breakfast in the morning might be kind of fun to create a nice little photograph of. On the grill. And then there is timing and lighting at certain times of day, especially sunny days, is not going to be ideal. High noon, I just for the most part avoid taking pictures at high noon unless it's something very specific where the lighting is not quite as critical. Shade works most of the time, so if you can find shade, that's fine, but otherwise sometimes you get these very harsh shadows in the food, and I don't necessarily like that look. I tend to like things a little more diffused, but this is some people may like this. I don't particularly care for it. Here's another example. Again, a lot of this actually is not a bad photo, but this is really nice because you do have a little more of a softer light casting on this. So this isn't horrible, but because there's almost like too much contrast here. So you really have a hard time making out what exactly this dish is. But if you don't have much of a choice, and a lot of times we don't, we have a chance, maybe we're at a picnic or something, we want to take a quick picture of a dish that's sitting on a picnic table. You don't have time for the sun to be ideal. So maybe try to get creative, position yourself someplace where you can get some interesting patterns with the shadows. That can be kind of fun, even if it's a little bit at an angle, say like mid-afternoon. But I kind of like the way this was put together with this circular shadow right at the side of the dish. And you can also, even with indoor shots, just have a little bit of a spotlight on the food via sunlight coming in the window. And you want to be careful of your own shadow. This is a picture that I took pretty quickly because I was really eager to dig in on this. This was on a vacation in Amsterdam with my wife. And I just really thought this dish was very picturesque. And so I snapped a picture of it. First of all, I probably would want this out of the frame. So I didn't do that very well. And also you can see shadows over here that I don't really want in the shot. Now this was done with my iPhone. So if you are going to take a picture of a dish that is brought to you at a restaurant, you might want to pay attention a little bit to what's in the frame, what you want out of the frame. I could probably crop this a little bit and maybe do something with it, but the shadows in here are what really, really don't work. And I don't know if I could have positioned myself to avoid this or not, but I mean, this was literally a snapshot. So. And so I'm going to stop there real quickly just to see if there are any questions. And hello to Carol. Let's see, you've popped in. Welcome. Just to see if there are any questions on lighting, and then I'll talk about staging. No. Okay. How are you, Carol?
Good, good, thank you.
Good.
I was on the other one, the YouTube first.
Okay, okay. Okay. So how would you stage some of these shots that you're going to take if you're not just taking them spontaneously with a smartphone or even a small compact camera? If you want to set it up nicely, you can opt for solid colored plating as well as matte plating. So there's not too much shine or glare if you can possibly do that, and go for solid colored backgrounds. Neutral colors are nice because they really bring out the food, especially if the food's pretty colorful. So this works pretty well. This one is really interesting in that you've got a very brightly colored stew here. And everything else is, other than the little garnishes here, are pretty, everything's black or kind of a charcoal gray of some sort. So that really brings out the stew, which is what you want. If you want to really showcase the food, you want to be able to, have it stand out. And this really does a nice job of it. Feel free to share opinions on any of these photos too. These are just collections from other photographers. I'll have a few of my own in here. This one is done. This may have been a studio shot of some sort. You can set up backdrops to create a shot like this if you want to do that with some lighting control of some sort, but that can work pretty nicely. I'll show you a picture in a little while where somebody did something like this and I think pretty much she used just what she found in her home to create something along this line. Okay, you can also have some white in the background. This is kind of nice because it really makes the fruit stand out. And again, white really helps just bring out the color in the food. Again, sometimes some black background of some sort can really be nice as well, just to create that contrast. Having some plating or some cutlery surrounding it. It's always kind of nice. You just might want to be sure you're not getting your own reflection in there in any way. And here's another one. This looks like you could do something pretty quickly. And just even with a smartphone, you can really bring out the texture of the skin in the bird here. And nice thing about smartphones today is they really kind of take photos with some pretty detailed texture. They just get a lot of definition in there in the shot. Wood can work well too. This is nice for, say, picnic tables, things of that nature. I like wood tables like this, just a nice color or shade. There's another example. That's a macro shot. And doesn't mean color is out of the question. You can still add some nice color using that kind of background. Now, you can buy, there may be a surface like this somewhere in your home. You can always buy different types of backgrounds and backdrops, as well as maybe some type of paper that you can sit on a table if you're going to take it from overhead or from the side, to really get a background that's a little more textured if you want, or just a solid color of some sort. Here's another one where you really get I think this might be pumpkin soup or some kind of squash soup. I'm not sure, but really brings that out nicely. You can see here, though, here is a reflection of the photographer in the spoon. So that's something you need to watch. If you can somehow avoid that, that's always great. And, I always like these red and white checkered tablecloths, especially if you're, doing a diner shot of some sort, or Italian restaurants, a lot of them. If you go to Little Italy, say in New York or someplace like that, you'll find a lot of these, and that makes for a nice sort of retro look for a photo. And then there's a lot of decor that you can add. And that could include some of the ingredients in the dish, just some garnishes, beverages on the side, whether that's a cup of coffee, tea, wine, anything like that. The utensils are good to have, and just other elements. Sometimes just throwing in decor like flowers. Now, here's one that somebody really set up nicely. Again, this is probably just done with some colored poster board of some sort. Okay, I did want to show this one. This is by a GetSetUp member, Susan Braden, who is really active in a lot of our well, Susan Jacobson, you know her, but yeah, she is a really avid photographer, and we have a photo challenge every week where people submit a photo based on a theme, and I'll talk a little bit about that before we close today. But she submitted this photo last week for the contest. The theme was pie, and you'll notice here she included lemons, the limoncello that went into this pie, and some eggs. This is a lemon meringue pie. So just effective use of ingredients being surrounding your subject here. And she just used a black backdrop that she had purchased a while back. So this all came together really nicely. Here's another one I really like. Once you have taken a picture too, if you are at all interested in doing some post-processing, as we say, meaning you maybe do some work in Photoshop, there are also some free options that you can try out online, where you can just upload the photo and play with it there. You can play with the contrast, enrich the color a little bit just to really make it stand out. But here, you've got a pretty dark blue background, but you've got some parsley or other plant life here surrounding it. And then the crackers and the fruit really stand out. Do something kind of rustic like this with burlap. Another idea for you. Just use a cutting board and some chopsticks at the side if you want to do that. Maybe drape a towel someplace. Even pine cones might work. Okay, I'm going to stop there again, see if there are any questions. Hey, Fred.
Sorry I'm late. I was in another meeting.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Glad you made it. So any questions on what I just went over, or other questions that come to mind for anybody? No. Okay. So composition is pretty important for shots like this, especially if you want to do something a little more artistic and not just a snapshot. And there are various approaches you can take in terms of setting the dish within the frame. You can shoot from straight overhead. Now, depending on how tall you are, you may want to get a step stool or something like that to take the shot, but this gets the entire dish all in there for people to see. Another one where that approach is taken. And these are some others that are taken from on high. And again, especially with dishes with some complexity to them in terms of ingredients, visible ingredients, I guess I should say. You want to try to get it all in if you can sometimes. You can also shoot from a 45-degree angle if you want to go that route. That's still nice. Here you've got some lighting at an angle, so you're seeing some texture in the salmon. Again. And again here. I'm not in love with this tablecloth or whatever this is sitting on. And there's another one. And then directly from the side, if you want to do that. This can be kind of challenging because sometimes the bowl or the cup or glass, whatever the dish is sitting in, may obscure some of the food that you want to show off. So you want to be really mindful of that when you're shooting from the side like this. Sometimes it can actually, especially with sandwiches cut in half, it can actually enhance it. So you can actually see what's in the sandwich. So that really brings out what you're trying to go after. Okay. But you can get really creative with those side views if you want to take that route too. This is a nice close-up. So don't be afraid to get close and to try for a shallow depth of field. So when I talk about that, I'm talking about essentially what you're seeing is a sharp focus in the foreground, and the background is, did I say background? I meant the background is kind of blurry. This is a nice effect to get. It puts emphasis on one area of the photo. You can use, if you're taking pictures with a smartphone, you can use the portrait setting on your phone to get that effect pretty easily. That says portrait setting, but you can use it for a lot more than portraits, which I do quite a bit. So think about that. This one I took years and years ago when I actually took a food photography class. And I think it might have been my first digital camera even that I used this on, but that kind of allowed me to look at how to really bring out some of the flakiness in these croissants. And if you are using a DSLR of some sort, you want to try for either using a macro lens sometimes will work, or a small f-stop. So here's an example. That's a wide depth of field. You'll see here, everything's in nice focus. And maybe you want that a lot of times. It's kind of neat. You see all the texture in the bread on the side. Or you may want to just zoom in on one area to really play up. So maybe just some of this caramelization at the top of the salmon. So that's a shallow depth of field. Everything becomes blurry around it. Couple of examples from me. This was a photo I took very quickly when I was over at a friend's house for dinner. And this is what he set down on the table. And it just was beautiful. I wish I would have been audacious enough to actually stand up on a chair and get more of it into the frame, but I decided to just snap a quick picture of it because it was presented so nicely. And that's a wide depth of field. Here's one I took at the Thanksgiving table. Not necessarily the ideal plating for this, but you can see here, I really zoomed in, got some of the brown area of the marshmallows showing up real nicely and really in focus. And both of these I took with an iPhone. This one I did too, using the portrait mode. So there's another one with a nice shallow depth of field close up. That is one I took again with my iPhone at a restaurant. Ordered some halibut. I really splurged for this. Halibut doesn't come cheap here on the East Coast, but I again like the presentation and there's another very shallow depth of field. And you see that again. A lot of emphasis right here on the front with the chocolate sprinkles. And again, here's one that is a little more of a wider depth of field. And this one I took in a restaurant just spontaneously again. And I actually did use the portrait mode here. So you'll notice it starts to kind of blur out up here. This was a really impulse shot, so to speak. Another thing to think about with these photos, and you'll probably noticed on a lot of the earlier ones that I showed there that you can get off center with your subject. So it doesn't have to be smack dab in the center of the frame. Probably heard the rule of thirds, which in photography means that you're sort of looking at your frame in thirds rather than just kind of a single single entity, so to speak. And you can just kind of sort of tilt your subject to somewhere in one of those thirds. So there's another one from overhead. You got a lot of negative space here, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Can still get the viewer's eye to focus on the food itself. Sometimes negative space can really work in your favor. And vertical shots too. You can do this, just be kind of off center. In fact, they're saying vertical photography or vertical orientation for photographs is really becoming quite the trend, because people are starting to do some pretty artistic things with their smartphones, but they tend to hold them like this rather than horizontally. So I think photography experts are just saying this is where the trend is going. So you don't always have to shoot in landscape orientation. Here's another one with sort of an off-center composition. Again, lots of negative space here, but light background really brings all this out. And same thing here. Okay. Any questions on what we just went over? Marilyn, does that give you some ideas for indoor projects?
Yeah, it gives me lots of ideas, things that I can incorporate that I already have around the house. So it was good.
Yeah. Oh,
Thank you.
great. Yeah, great. Great. Okay. Okay, just a couple, three other things to keep in mind. Wait until the last minute if you're going to add sauces to anything you make and want to photograph. That just helps you avoid it getting overly saturated, and the dish getting overly saturated with that sauce. So if you can put the sauce on, pour the sauce on, then take the picture real quickly, that's going to be ideal. For hot dishes, try getting a little steam rising from the food into the picture. That's a nice touch. And also really pay attention to your setting. Make sure there isn't anything, on the outskirts of the frame that really is not all that appealing, like a paper clip or something like that, that you don't really want to be in the picture. So you want to have a pretty orderly table when you do this. Okay. So again, just for some takeaways, always be aware of lighting and try to make the most of the shadows, light streaming into the windows. Lots of elements beyond the food are nice to add in. Table decor, utensils, spices, other ingredients, even cloth. You can shoot from a variety of angles, including straight overhead. Also, think about doing close-ups, and you can try using a shallow depth of field for those close-ups. And again, don't be afraid to go off center with your subject.